What's up, Cruit Group podcast listeners? This episode is brought to you by Pin, an AI optimized recruitment solution from first contact to scheduled interviews. Use code Cruit Group in all caps to get 10% off your first month. This episode is also brought to you by Wags and Wine, the ultimate subscription box for the dog-crazed wine enthusiast. Use code WAGS50 for 50% off your first box.
I'm at the top of my class and you didn't get me a job. You know getting jobs sounds like you're going to wish you would. Think about it.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Cruit Group podcast. I am your host, Ryan Levy, with another special guest, Mr. Stephen Liu, co-founder and CEO of Pin.com. Welcome, Stephen. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk a little AI and recruiting with you today. I think this is a hot topic across the industry right now, and I've had a chance to use your product, so thank you for the demo. I know we were one of the early users of the product, so excited to dive into that. But I want to talk about your background first. This is really the first time we have spoken in depth, so we're kind of winging it, but I will interview you as if you were a candidate. But originally, you started your career as a developer, correct? And ultimately went on to be the co-founder of Interseller, which was later acquired by Greenhouse a few years later. But talk to us back to the beginning, like Interseller those days.
Yeah, totally. I feel like you described my entire background already. I have I was an engineer. I started coding when I was 13, so I was always very curious and just kind of solving problems. I just had a very heavy engineer's mindset. So I worked for a bunch of probably a popular startup named Compass, so they're a big real estate firm. And now over time, I kind of was like, all right, I want to start my own thing. And so I kind of found over time, the number one kind of problem people have issues with is reaching out to people. So Interseller, it started initially as a sales and recruitment tool. But 2 years into that product, 2019, we were recruitment is a much more interesting problem and probably one that resonates more with me. I love building teams. I love building people that work really well together. You find the same things that what people are motivated by, you will build great things. And so I kind of had this revelation that I wanted to go into the recruitment game. So Interseller pivoted into recruitment, but more specifically, we were trying to help agency businesses do both business development and candidate outreach. So we built kind of our product more and more towards that. And eventually in 2021, I think in October, Greenhouse kind of saw our product as we need something like this. So they acquired us during that time.
Pretty cool.
We integrated into Greenhouse, and Interseller became Greenhouse sourcing automation. So
I've had a chance at the enterprise level to use Greenhouse sourcing automation. So I've seen it firsthand and definitely understand the value behind it. So congrats on that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I'm curious, how do you come up with the idea to get into the recruitment space? If you're not a recruiter yourself, was this just, do you know a recruiter? How does that work in your mind, and how do you get to that point? I just find that part interesting.
Yeah. So funny enough, I had a few friends that are recruiters, more specifically Miles, who worked at Squarespace at the time. Mm-hmm. And when we first built Interseller, it was we were serving both salespeople and recruiters, but Miles kind of was hey, you should try this same thing because this is what I currently do. And it's very similar to sales. Right. And so in essence, we kind of were okay, the real difference in terms of what email sequencing is and the process of finding candidates, LinkedIn is still involved, email is still involved. The only two differences is I'm reaching out to you in a personal manner. And the third one was we need to connect to ATSs. Everything was very similar back then in terms of sales and recruitment. So we had the idea of just okay, cool, let's keep honing in on this. What we found out more is that like personalization matters a lot more in recruiting.
Sure.
The volumes are a lot less, meaning that like the email sequencing like does really, really well versus a sales form. So it was like once we kind of shed the sales side of things off our business, recruitment did very, very well for us. Actually, it was like, I think we pivoted in like December 2018. We like literally just changed messaging on our website, and like our revenue like went up 25% that next
Wow.
month.
Really?
And so like the messaging just became a lot clearer. The entire team back then was like, I know what the goal is. And so when we kind of like started focusing more on just one specific aspect, we like the entire team just started talking to more and more recruiters. I started talking to more recruiters, just understanding more and more of the problems. And of course, there's a lot, and there's a lot of things you could solve. And I still have a lot of those things that I want to solve in my head, and I can talk to you about that like with Pin.
Yeah.
But that specific Interseller was just trying to solve one thing, which is like outbound sourcing, get in front of candidates
Right.
before they're finding a job. So we were solving that problem, and kind of were like very, very like laser focused on that until obviously Greenhouse came in and said like,
right.
Hey, why don't you join us instead?
No, that's cool. I guess before we get into the pin.com idea and all that, I'm curious, growing up, like I know you said you started coding when you were 13. That's cool. Did you go down like an entrepreneurial journey as a kid as well? Like, were you the type of kid that was making websites for people or like other things? Like talk to us a little bit about that. I'm always curious of like true roots of entrepreneurs, because like, obviously you've done it once, you had an exit. It's in a way, it's like, are you crazy? Why do you want to do it again? But like, I'm curious even deeper. Did you like do that type of stuff when you were a kid or growing up?
Yeah. I have a pretty interesting like teenage story, but so I got into like coding because both my parents are also in computer science.
Okay.
But more specifically, there was this one video game called StarCraft, and they have this thing called the map editor. And I got really, really involved in that and like started building maps. And it was like a good way to like introduce like someone like me who was like 10 or 11 years old to get into programming, because you're like doing triggers and everything. But more importantly, I was like building some small websites for some foundations, et cetera, like single pages, et cetera. And eventually someone told me about Facebook. And Facebook at the time was releasing this thing called the third-party API. And I basically mimicked what MySpace did on top of Facebook, which was like you can upload music onto your profile and anyone could basically play that song.
Okay.
So my upbringing was like literally scaling that to like almost every Facebook user known to existence.
That's wild.
At one point or another, I think 99% of like the Facebook population was like using the music app. And then like at like 16 years old, I think.
Did you sell that to them or what? Like, how did that work?
Eventually, like Facebook's interface changed so many times. Remember, it's like
really
early days of Facebook. And then they like started getting rid of like shedding third-party apps like that live on their platform. And more utilized it as like a third-party API. So eventually over time, it kind of died. But I think the funniest moment I had was the RIAA, which is like Sony BMG's like law firm and everything like that, basically sent me a cease and desist letter. Seeing Mark Zuckerberg in the email at the same time and just being like, you got to stop doing this. And I was just like, okay, fine. Eventually I turned that app into like indie artists' way to publish and popularize their music on Facebook. And that was like kind of my like big thing into engineering. So I learned almost all of my engineering skills by myself, building that product. And then I went.
What language? Like, was this Java based or
PHP?
PHP. Ah, nice. That's amazing.
Yeah. So
I love it.
I have a tattoo in PHP. Man, this is like 10 years old, and there's like 3 mistakes to this already because like coding programming languages evolve over time. So good times, but
too funny. So talk to us about Pin then. Like, how did that idea come about? I like I said, I've used the product. It's great. But talk to us like how this idea came to be and where do you see it going?
Yeah. So if I were to describe Interseller, though I would say those were tools, and Pin is automation. And so, in light of basically all OpenAI, Anthropic, all of these really crazy AI models that can do like a dramatic amount of things now, we thought of like, okay, cool, like this, we can do this now. We can automate like the entire process of outbound sourcing from start to finish,
Right.
which involves four things, right? Which is sourcing, so finding the ideal candidate that you're looking for. The second one is reaching out to them. So I need to find their contact information. I need to write a personalized message and email them.
Right.
Third is like scheduling. So maybe I'm skipping a few, but scheduling is the last piece. So like they interact with you. Now they're asking you questions. You're trying to get them on the phone. So we
Sure.
made that process too, and schedule time with them from your calendar. And so if you think about it, a lot of those processes do not involve essentially a human to be in front of a candidate.
Right.
Which is just like sending emails back and forth, finding candidates. They're all kind of like back of house. You're on a computer, like spending hours at a time trying to find the right candidate and then like messaging them, etc. So we want to automate that entire process for you from start to finish. So you can enable AI agents for each and every one of these pieces. You can turn on and off which ones that you don't want, for example, and have like your ideal process. So you can say like, I love AI sourcing. Sourcing's really good. I'm going to let AI do that, but I want to craft every single message by myself. You can pick and choose which level of automation you want. And eventually, like if you're feeling really comfortable, you can turn on the whole gambit.
Yeah, that's super interesting. How does this work with like a recruiting company's current CRM? Like we use Loxo, for example. Like how would you guys integrate with something like a Loxo?
Yeah, so Loxo is more kind of like that end piece, right? So like we're finding candidates. Our base is like all of LinkedIn, right? So we like
Okay.
have the entire LinkedIn database, and you're able to essentially search that database. Your connection from Pin to like Loxo or any other ATS gives us the ability to know like who's applied, who have you reached out to already, and who can we reach out to, right? And so like Pin will know and understand like all the different types of communications that you've had with other candidates and like suggest other candidates that you may not have thought of or reached out to. But in the future, in the later parts of our kind of like evolution, we do plan on building out something called applicant review, which then we look at your entire database and like do the same thing. So instead of LinkedIn being like kind of like the source where we have currently right now, we can look at your ATS and deliver essentially the same level of like AI automation and sourcing on top of your own data.
Got it. And would you say that it's most effectively used like as an add-on to your current CRM, or like do you envision this in the future being like a CRM even?
Like a full replacement, I think possibly in the future. I don't know. I think like maybe 3 years down the road, we become like kind of your number one source and tool. But I
Right.
think really the key that we can do is be your engine, right? We can be your engine on finding candidates. So it's best as us, because we're like such a young company, to essentially attach on top of like what you're utilizing, rather
Right.
than trying to or like get the lift in order to like
Sure.
migrate your entire system over. So like it's like most recruiters and companies and shops basically like have their ATS of choice, and it's like it takes a lot of like manpower to just like train and move different.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So like our philosophy right now is like, well, what if we just integrate on top of it and just be your engine? So a lot of ATSs, they're more focused on being your record, or like your database, your record of truth. We want to be your like engine to finding and utilizing that data inside of your inside of your database. So think of us as like an attachment on top that actually does all the heavy lifting on top of the database.
Yeah. Yeah, and because I always wonder, like putting myself in your shoes, right? If I'm trying to bring a new product to market and like I'm targeting the recruiting industry, I feel like people are so set in their ways, right? So I think a big thing that I wonder from your point of view is like, how do you, like, if you were talking to my team right now, right? So like you've given us a trial, which you have done in the past for us. And within Loxo, for example, within our CRM, there's a good, like, we pay for a premium. So there's something called Loxo Source, and it like is a pretty good sourcer, right? How do you go about user adoption? Like if you could talk to my recruitment team right now and tell them why they should use Pin in addition to Loxo or whatever your CRM is out there, you know, Bullhorn, whatever you're using. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I think it's the differentiating factor on how we actually utilize AI.
Okay.
And I know this sounds like a buzzword, right? Like 2 letters that say AI. And there's like, I put companies in like 4 buckets of like how they utilize it. There's
Right.
like cool, my product now like integrates with an API, which is like OpenAI. Almost every company can do this in one form or another.
Sure.
So it's like the traditional way that people utilize it is like, I have this like prompt, like here's my search. I take this and I'm translating it into some like Boolean search filters, which isn't
Yeah.
like really valuable to you because you're probably better than the AI of translating those like filters. Then there's like the second way, which is like where we're actually like fine tuning like and building our own models around all the resumes that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And basically like when we let AI and LLM loose on every single resume, it now understands details that you typically like wouldn't be able to do in a Boolean search. I'll give you an example, right? So
Okay.
I'm looking for a sales manager, but I need to make sure I'm not looking for account managers. Even though they have like the word manager inside of it, it knows the difference
Yes.
between what a sales manager is and like an account manager is.
That's
So
cool.
Pin basically is able to make that differentiation, say like, hey, this person spent 2 years as a sales manager, 5 years as a sales IC, and be able to like give you that ability to be like, hey, I'm looking for someone of these specific details. Like another example is I'm looking for a VP in regulatory affairs, but like there's a lot of different like industries and fields of what
Right.
regulatory affairs is. You can specify things like has dealt with biotech regulation, has dealt with
Sure.
these things and specific items like that. And Pin will basically find those details for you. So it's being able to like destructure your search, which is like typically in like form fields, and being able to ask specifically not just your requirements, but your responsibilities, right? It's like, this is what I'm really looking for, but in order to find what I'm looking for, I have to translate it into responsibilities. So we're
Yeah.
going back up the job description by saying, like, oh, we found people with similar responsibilities before that you're looking for. Here are the top like 20 that we think are good fits for you. So we're changing the game by eliminating the need to basically translate that search over, which like, again, traditional tools like Loxo Search, LinkedIn Recruiter Search, all those different products that you see today are literally just like, hey, I'm looking for headcount of this size. I'm looking for company names of this size.
Right.
Maybe these keywords in their resume and all this kind of stuff. Whereas like we're really trying to like make every single resume searchable by just plain language and plain text.
Yeah. You know, it's something that blows my mind about the recruiting industry in general is like when I first learned how to do recruiting 13 years ago or whatever, I had to like really learn how to do Boolean searching and like crazy syntax and stuff like that. And nowadays it's like, and I was always really bad at it. So like my searches would be like developer and, you know, integration with whatever, you know, like third party APIs and like C++ or Java, whatever it was. Right. And nowadays, like with technology, you don't have to be a good Boolean sourcer to find like the best candidates. You know, it's like, so I totally believe in AI for sourcing specifically. I think scheduling is huge too. Like I always include my Calendly link or whatever, my good time link. But yeah, any additional thoughts on that? Well, I think there was a couple more points, right? And how they utilize AI.
Yeah. So downstream the process, I think everyone has done this. But like now we have things that like can write your email sequence for you, can like tie in essentially a sentence, a personalized sentence or two into an email message to a candidate to make that geared towards. I think the third one is like responding back. So if a candidate responds back and says like, hey, I'm not interested, you can automate the like, thanks for letting me know, or thanks for your time,
Right.
etc. And the last bit, which is they're interested, right? Let's say they're interested and they say like, hey, I'm available tomorrow to chat if you want to like get on the phone, right? Like basically our AI knows your calendar. Our AI basically can figure out like when they're available by them specifying it, and then just immediately shooting over like a calendar invite within like 5 minutes, because you know if you did it within like a second it would be kind of creepy. But
Right.
I can shoot a calendar invite almost like in an automated way to just reserve that time automatically, right? And it can handle all these different like edge cases that like a candidate
Cool.
may have. But those are all table stakes, I would say, in terms of like AI and automation. The cool parts that like beyond just that is we are able to like basically match the recruiter's tone. So like given whatever you've sent in the past like year or so in your sent email inbox to candidates, we're able to kind of like
Wow.
match your direct tone now, and like be you as closely as
That's
possible.
cool.
So if, for example, like you've mentioned companies before to candidates, or like maybe you've said like, hey, really love what you're doing here at Google because you're like in the ad search team, like something of that nature, like we can add those tidbits and various different things now. It can do things now like it knows like this is like stupid things that are not done yet, or like they're not turned on because we thought it was a little too weird, but it knows the weather. It knows
No way.
and knows like sports games and knows like all these other like funny, crazy things. But it
Yeah.
was a little too creepy, so we decided to turn it off. And so right now, it just like focuses very heavily on how you've sent emails in the past, your job description, and their resume, and tries to blend kind of like a little bit of some tidbits here to be like, hey, noted like maybe like, hey, noticed you were at Google, like how long were you there, like that kind of stuff, to like kind of start and engage that conversation so that every email out is fully personalized.
Cool. Love that. One sidebar question: does it pull from other sources besides LinkedIn?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is kind of like obviously like the root of
Right.
most resumes. So we use
Right.
that kind of like a core piece. But like as you're alluding to, which is most LinkedIn profiles, maybe 20% of them tell you what they do.
Yeah.
This is just inherently just because candidates are really bad at explaining what they do. So what we've done is we've taken other pieces of data that we can obtain, like fundraising information, headcount information of that company year over year or month over month, job postings, job descriptions, et cetera, that any company has ever posted. And what we do is we aggregate all that information into one single resume. So now we can like figure out like, hey, you were a software engineer at, let's say, like Betterment software engineers had these responsibilities. So we can assume that you may have done these certain things in order for us to like better understand what your skill set is. Because that
Right.
gives us like, let's say like with all of that information, that gets us closer to like an 80% coverage of like LinkedIn profiles in order to like be like, oh, cool, this is what it is. But really the next key part is we can now figure out what industry or like that you're specifically in. So for me, I can comfortably say I've been doing like leadership roles in recruitment software, right? So the
Yeah.
AI basically can determine all of this for us now, and like determine kind of like a 10-word sentence of like your background. Whether it be an entrepreneur, sales manager, et cetera, we know the skills, the level, and the industry that you work in. But we're always looking to expand more and more data, because the more data we have, the better we can make those searches, of course. It's a
Yeah.
two-faced problem, right? Like you're only as good as your data, and you're
Yep.
only as good as like how you use those models. And like using the models specifically is a very important piece. But now we're back to that other problem. So like we're just trying to obtain as much data as possible, so that way we can surface it to recruiters. Then again, that hones in the search and delivers you more candidates other than just like what's available on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So talk to us about AI in general in the recruiting industry and like where do you feel like it's been lacking so far or like not used properly?
I
Where should it
think
not be used, you know?
my personal opinion is 90% of AI recruitment products are just for show to add in two letters called AI
Yeah,
into whatever the product line is. It's like the flavor of the week. And maybe
sure.
there's like 10% of use cases where I think it's really valuable. I think one thing specifically where it's really valuable is interviewing, more specifically like generating interview notes. It's getting people like when they've finished a face-to-face meeting is like, yeah, if you know this well, like maybe like your interviewer, like, I don't know, has a million other interviews or and so forth, and yeah, they don't submit feedback until the week later. How likely are they gonna like remember essentially like those little
Yeah.
moments and tidbits? And so, what if you were just able to like, be in a call like this? It's recorded, and then you just like kind of like ask AI to be like, "Can you show me moments where this person said something?" There's a product like this already. I forget their name right now, but
I've used them in the past. Like I guess and this is a good point because I want to get your opinion on this. I felt when I was using that software, although it was very useful to me, I felt like I could see the side of it where it felt intrusive to like have this robot or like this computer. Basically, I always say robot. I know it's a computer, but like is basically like listening to your conversation and like typing up notes or whatever. But like, I don't know. Maybe I don't want that out there in like the universe. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
yeah, I mean, there's a privacy kind of concern and like who owns what data and things like
Yeah.
that. I think it's more like an adjustment period. I think as we, I think it's here to stay. I think
Hmm.
AI will just. I think I like to say AI today is at the dumbest it's ever been,
Right.
and it only gets better from here. And so I think it's a realm of people become a little bit uncomfortable because they don't know what AI can and cannot do. Now, I'm
Right.
gonna say this like straight out. Your job is safe. AI is not gonna like replace like the common human interactions that like people do normally. And I'll give you an example, right? Because this is like the famous like AI problem of all time is,
Yes.
have you ever seen like OpenAI try to like count the number of R's in strawberry? Right?
No.
It's like there's two R's in strawberry, right? They like named their latest model like their code name was Strawberry because it was such a big pain in their rears because like it couldn't count properly. And the reason being is it doesn't have critical thinking like you and I
Right.
have. When we
Right.
look at a problem, we can critically think stage by stage of like how to solve this problem.
Sure.
Whereas like AI is more like they're called large language models, but ultimately what they really are is just like here's kind of like the user's input. What is the likelihood of like this word and the next word being like the next output? It's really making predictions of like your language versus like actually knowing like the root of like the problem you're trying to solve. So if you give it some really broad spectrum problem, it's not going to do super well, but it's going to essentially reference things that it's trained on, right? And so
Yeah.
the key thing about AI is that like training data is super important. If you have
Yeah.
really bad training data, your outputs are going to be really odd. This is why there's another like old age thing, which is like I think Google, if I'm not mistaken, licensed Reddit's data. So it's like, cool, if you train a model against Reddit's data, where you're probably going to get a bunch
Yeah.
of like weird conspiracy theories or like any of these like crazy nonsense like comments and posts that it may produce, mainly because again, the data is like so important in order to
Of
like create
course.
outputs that are
Yeah.
meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that that part is super interesting to me, you know. I don't know. I just to me, I don't think you can ever take the human element out of like connecting with another human about an opportunity or whatever. But like I've also done some consulting on the corporate side of things for a couple of organizations in the last like 5 years. And I can tell you that like there's been a lot of layoffs in corporate recruiting. And I think like AI does play a big part in that. Like I think the functions of the sourcer role, like the pure sourcer role, or even like the scheduler role, like a scheduling coordinator, like if those folks aren't doing additional projects or other like HR related aspects to like add value to an organization besides just scheduling, I think like AI could take those types of jobs. And I think it just like makes good recruiters that much more powerful, right? If they utilize their tools. But like I do think it eliminates a lot of easy jobs from our industry.
Yeah, it is definitely a challenge there. Like if your role specifically, like, you know, you're in like the recruitment function at a corporation and like all you did was scheduling or like one very specific job, I would personally, like, my advice is diversify your skill set as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
I mean, you are like, I think this even says even before AI became a thing, which is like you're a diversified skill set. Like, let's say you were a full desk recruiter, is way more valuable than just one specific function. But that being said, right, like people like need to get into the field that they want to be in through these like entry level roles, right? And so
Right.
that is something to think about. I don't know exactly like what the next kind of like solution there is. Maybe it's like you just go straight into the recruitment function without like the scheduling side of things as like an
Sure.
early recruiter. But
What I have a question though, like what's your thoughts on like voice automation and stuff like that? Like can I simulate like an interview prep as a recruiter? Like can I like teach this machine to like prep my candidate on exactly what I would tell them about the XYZ client? Like if I input good data into this thing, could it replicate my voice and do an interview prep and pretend to be me? Like are we talking that in the future?
I mean, I think we see it today. If you go
Is that
watch,
too far? Is that too far?
it's not far. Like, look, like if you go watch our video on our website,
Okay.
there's a voice in there, and
Yeah, I know, but that
complete-
kind of freaks me out. Tell me more.
it's completely AI based, but and it feels and sounds very natural now, which is really, really crazy. I'm not quite sure it can do like interview prep or like career coaching, that kind of stuff, but mainly because there's so many nuances. And like the other side of it to keep in mind is its training data has like a cutoff date. And I feel like
Right.
advice changes on a monthly basis, depending on who you talk to. And so I would be highly skeptical that it would do well. It could do very basic things by saying like, here's what the company does, like the minute, like if you said like, oh, let me prep the candidate the minute before by like calling them and just giving them a 60-second tidbit of like what the company does, what's their product, like who's the recruiter, who's the hiring manager, and their names, it would absolutely be able to do that. And I think that's pretty valuable. Maybe
Yeah, I think so too.
But yeah, if it's just like literally like Twilio called you on your phone and like you just hear 60-second or maybe even shorter, like 30 seconds. Here's what's going on. You're interviewing with these people today. This is their LinkedIn, like here's their LinkedIn profile. Tell me a little tidbit about them. Where are they located? Like, what does that company do? What's their main product? How much revenue do they make? All that kind of stuff. That'd be kind of interesting. That sounds more like a sales idea too. So like, you know, prepping AEs for a call, which is like, look at their Salesforce data, 30 seconds, give them a tidbit. But I don't know, like, think about it as this. Where does voice do better than email? I do think that like some people just glance at emails. I'm unfortunately one of those guys.
I never take action on emails either, man. I'm the same way.
Yeah, and if someone just told me straight, maybe that's valuable, which is like, cool, I just clone your voice, which by the way, again, like all doable things. You could clone your voice and you can make it say the things that you want through just text.
I think that would be super cool just to do like for interview prep to do something different. Like you'd probably be baffled how many candidates like screw up interview times or like they no show or they're late, whatever. So like maybe if even 15 minutes before or it was like, hey, this is about to happen, whatever?
Yeah, man, I wish there was a more perfect world that like candidates didn't do that. But I live in I live in I live in a bubble, but I don't think I've ever in my entire life missed an interview both
Me
on both
either.
sides. But I can't believe that's like a thing for people and candidates.
Oh, it happens all the time, man. Hey, random question. How did you get the web domain pin.com? Did you have to buy that from someone?
Uh, so the story behind that is Expa, who's like our incubator VC firm that kind of like is like sponsoring us
Uh-huh.
ultimately and has invested in us. They have a lot of like brand domains, and ultimately we take one of those and
Oh, that's cool. I always wondered how that works. I was like, because like my wife and I own a company called Wags and Wine. I was telling you about that off in air. But
yeah.
like I bought wagsandwine.com like 15 years ago and I just like never did anything with it. So like I own several domains, but like I always wonder like a company like yours, how does that work?
I mean, you go find the person, you give them a cash offer, and they either say yes or no, right? Like, I think the most famous one is like milk.com, right? It was like they were trying to buy it for less, and they were like, "Here's my price," but the milk industry decided not to buy it. But anyways, like and so they made and just branded themselves like Got Milk because like they rather spend all of that money on marketing with
Right.
gotmilk.com rather than milk.com. But um I think over time I've seen domains sell, like let's say like vanity domains, maybe like very keywords or 3-letter domains,
Sure.
etc. I've seen them sell from anywhere between 100,000 all the way up to like 2 million. So it's
Wow, that's crazy. Good to
yeah, and
know.
you either do things I think like cash deals or like 50,
Sure.
which is like both cash and equity.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's cool. So what's next for Pin? Like where do you guys go from here? How many employees do you guys have now? Like, or how many people were behind this and how has it grown? Give us some more details.
yeah. So we're a fairly new company. I think we've been around for like 9-ish months now.
Right.
Today we're 8 people, mostly in New York, but distributed Serbia, Austria, Vancouver, LA, New York. So we're a pretty remote team, but localized. Like I think like 5 of us are in New York, or
Got it.
four of us are in New York. We have an office too, which is kind of nice. Next stage is a pin. I mean, we're about to launch into the public soon. So like
Is that a SaaS model?
yeah, SaaS model. So we charge kind of like the classic per user license with some other add-ons here and there, but it's a user-based license. You can utilize us with automation or without. We're trying to kind of like compete against like the gems of the world
Right.
to capture a lot of that market. And if you want to turn on AI, we have that ability to do so. But we're trying to kind of like be your like sourcing engine. So like this algorithm and this like AI that we have can be utilized both like on any database that like you put it on. So our goal is to eventually do things like attach to your ATS and make that searchable. So that way you can reutilize maybe your 1,000,000, 2,000,000, 3,000,000 candidate database before you open a role. And then also be able to like utilize that as
Right.
like, when you have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 applicants, like, can you help me find the people that match specific criteria or have done similar roles before in the past? That's kind of
Yeah,
like,
I've noticed like even in a greenhouse, like now, you know, some of these companies get thousands of applications, like you said, but like the AI built in with greenhouse, you can like sort by the candidates that are actually a fit. So like totally see the value in something like that. It's super cool, man.
yeah, that's where we're going. I think we've built a lot of the tools to kind of like operate sourcing and so forth. But really, I think the key sell of like what we're trying to do is like, again, just be that AI add-on to anything that you utilize, and to be able to like find you those candidates very quickly. I think you know, a lot of people get shell shocked when they're like hit with a new JD, a new role, and they're like, where do I start?
Yeah.
And just like 20 candidates, here you go. Like, do these look like good fits? And like the goal is to get that spot on like 9 out of 10 times. And we're close. We're very, very close to kind of like doing that. Our launch is probably soon, and so we're exiting this beta phase and going and like getting into our launch phase soon. And so that's soon, few days or few weeks from now. So
That's exciting. I love it, man. I'm curious, when you sold to Greenhouse, like you obviously like had one of those contracts where you had to stay for a year or something like that, I assume. Did you have to take like a cool off period to like have a non-compete before you could start Pin? I'm just curious how that works from an acquisition standpoint.
yeah, absolutely. So I didn't start Pin straight out of like Greenhouse. In
Right.
fact, I was just kind of like advising companies and just kind of like taking a moment. I had a daughter last year, so she's like
Nice. Congrats.
7 months old. I can hear her. She's running around my apartment right now. But yeah, I took some time off to be a dad, just to kind of like, you know, raise her.
Nice.
I find having a child is a great deal of work and also a lot of excitement. So
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time just doing that, thinking about kind of like new ideas. And what I realized is all of my ideas are in like all my good ideas are in recruitment, because I know the space decently well at this point. There are some other related ones, but I was very, very fixated on like, what can AI do and what can like I do with AI. And like, I just kind of combined both of my expertises there.
Yeah, that's cool.
This is what we want to do.
Do you still code every day?
Do I code every day? I probably code about 4 days a week, maybe a little less than that.
Do you enjoy coding, or are you like sick of it after this long?
I don't think I'm sick of it, but I'm definitely out of my. I start getting out of my wheelhouse a little bit, in the sense of like, there are definitely people on my team that are smarter than me
Mm-hmm.
and know that code much better than I do. I'm more like the orchestrator. I can see
Okay.
the whole picture. So meaning
That's
that there's
cool.
so many things that go on that like each and every developer like does. And I can see how all of it integrates both on a product standpoint and an engineering standpoint. So that's like where my value lies, of just like seeing the
Nice.
picture and then like being able to answer all my entire team's questions of like, you know, what if this use case happens? What if this edge case occurs? What if this does? And I'm able to basically quickly be like, oh yeah, this is what happens downstream or upstream the software. And this is how recruiters will like utilize the product. So the less I code, the better they become. And so
There you go.
I'm trying to diminish more and more of how much I code, because the more I code, it becomes more like only I know it, which is
Sure.
a bad thing. So I'm having more and more of my team kind of just do all the coding themselves, because then they understand it. They know how the product kind of like operates and what puzzle piece goes where for them, and they get to see the whole picture and feel excited about building like the cool aspects of the product.
No, that's awesome. One other question I have, just in general. Obviously, you've been a part of several high growth startups. What makes a good startup employee to you? Like we do a lot of Cruit Group specializes in partnering with high growth startups. But from what you've seen in your companies that have been acquired or grown or started, whatever the scenario, like what makes a good startup employee to you as a decision maker?
Yeah, excitement. I think like there's a realm of like a job is just a job. And then there's the next realm is like, what gets me excited about this company? And so I generally look for people who are like, oh, what, like their gears are running almost immediately. Like
Sure.
almost like very product heavy, product focused, product driven. They're like, oh, what happens if like this happens? And like, yeah, great question, because this is like the same thought process that we had. It's people basically like who are thinking of like, oh, like either one way or another. It doesn't have to be the whole picture like I see it, but it's like this user experience is really weird. Have you thought about doing this? Or like, oh, these two systems don't play nice with each other. Or like, ultimately, it's just like thinking above and beyond just kind of like whatever the task is at hand. That's what I try to look for in people. And so like, I tend to like interview people at like, what did you do at your last company? What excited you there, right? The other one obviously is like, I'm looking obviously for like specific responsibilities and skills, and like if you can satisfy that, that's like baseline and bare minimum. But I guess it's like more the whipped cream on top is like the candidate who displays that they're excited about working in the field that they are in.
Do you think that goes into culture, right? Like if someone's excited about working at a company, I think naturally it builds a better culture.
For sure. Yeah. And like the role of the CEO is to build a team, right? This is what I love doing. It's just like finding the dynamics of a company that make them drive towards like the finish line. It's almost kind of like you're operating a bit of a sports team. You're encouraging everyone to be like, hey, this is the goal. We're all going there together, and getting everyone on the same page about it. That's kind of like my role in the company. But at the same time, I always find a little bit like there's like a path, and finding like the person to be on the same path with you is really important, because not everyone's going to be on that same path.
Of course.
In fact, like after 2 years or so, people grow faster than companies do. And so what happens is like people diverge with like the company's goals and aspects, which is totally fine. It's like once you understand that as a leader, you understand that like there are two things. Like if I can grow you with the growth of the company, I'm doing a really good job, because I'm aligning your goals, your personal goals with the company's goals. But eventually over time that expires. I think like about the averages like for a startup like employee, I think it's about 2.5 years. And for a later stage is about 4 years. And so beyond that, it's like, okay, cool. Once I see and identify those like little phases, I start thinking a little bit like, how can I help you more? The company's here, but you want to be like over here. And so I try to help like kind of externally also, if like that's possible. Sometimes it's not, of course. But again, like you're going to have teammates that like don't make sense from year 1 at year 9. And like knowing that is totally fine. And like once you start accepting it, and like managing becomes a lot easier, because like you can focus on the people who are really determined and want to like reach that goal. But really it's goal oriented. Like, hey, like if a person comes in and says like really want to do a startup, like I want to be the first 5 employees because like they grow really well, I learn really fast, I can do and operate. Connor's basically this person that I'm describing. I want to be able to just like take all of my knowledge and like operate the way I want to operate. It's great, because that's exactly what we need. And so the alignment is there, and we're driving towards like the finish line together of like both his goals and the company's goals.
Yeah, that's cool. No, that's a great answer, man. I always like to know, because I think that's something like first-time founders get wrong a lot, is like their culture and just hiring in general, right? Like I think earlier in my career, I only recruited people from like big banks, and that type of person doesn't necessarily succeed in a startup world, so it's just like a totally different type of experience. So that's all, man. But that's it. I know we're almost out of time here, so I appreciate you jumping on, man. It was great to learn your story. I look forward to continuing to use Pin. If you're a recruiter out there listening to this, I would say internal or agency, I think either side could use this. Just check out pin.com and use code Cruit Group, and you get 10% off.
Nice. Well, thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, appreciate your time, man. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.